Can you sell your books at a local craft fair? And if so, how do you do it? I've got the answers in this video. And stay tuned because I have one really important tip that you need to hear before you do your very first craft fair to make sure that it will be a success. Colleen M. Story here, and I'm super excited to talk to you about this topic today because I just went to my very first local craft fair. It's a lot more involved than I thought it was going to be, but it's also a lot more rewarding than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to walk you through what I learned if you want to try this avenue for marketing and selling your books. Some craft fairs have been around for a long time and are run by people who really know what they're doing. Others, not so much. And so they're a lot smaller and you're not going to get the audience at those that you would at a craft fair that's been going for a while. The craft fair that I took part in has been going for over 14 years in my town. The two ladies that were running it were really on the ball. They gave us suggestions on how to share the craft fair, but also what to do when we got there. There was several really helpful ideas on how we could bring people over to our booth and that sort of thing. Plus they had their ducks in the row as far as the paperwork we needed to file for taxes, because yes, that's something you probably need to think about, and they helped us do that so that it was really, really easy. The good news is that once you are prepared and you've gone through it, then you have the equipment you need and you can do many more after that without having to spend additional cash. But that first time out, you may need to spend some money, and let me explain how that works. Initially, you usually need to pay for the booth space. Get some other local authors to go in with you on this booth. That works really well for a couple of reasons. Number one, it reduces your costs, but number two, it gives your booth more variety and more presence when you're actually at the craft fair. We got together and decided on a theme that we were going to use that would represent books in general. I got the backdrop, she got the tablecloths. They all went together. It looks really cool. I'm showing you a picture right here of our booth when we got it put together. We worked hard to make everything sort of uniform, but yet highlighting what each of us did that was different. Number two thing you have to think about is the elements you can see in this booth. Do you need a backdrop? I was lucky because I already had a video stand, a backdrop stand that I'm using right now, and so all I had to do was get the backdrop that worked for both of us, which was the Once Upon a Time. Where are you going to put your merchandise, which is mainly your books? Most of the time, that means you need a table. At some craft fairs, they will supply a table or they will allow you to rent one for a little bit extra. This craft fair did not do that. We had to supply our own tables. So you have to think about what do you need to set up your books and everything else. First, you need stands to put your books on, so make sure you have those. Second, you need to let the customers know what your prices are. You can either do that with little price tags on each one, or you can have a price list printed up. I would suggest a price list. It seems to work out a little better. It's a little more convenient, a little less messy. You don't have to have prices in front of each of your books. The next thing you want to think about is having some sort of sign that tells the customers who you are. I didn't have anything like that, so I made one before I went. You can see here what I put together. I got it printed at Vistaprint, and then I got a little sign stand from Amazon for $27, I think it was. That did take an initial investment. Next thing that each of us got was this handy little book stand right here. I'm showing you a picture of it. Super light, super easy to carry, and it was so awesome in the booth because we were able to put our different books on these different levels. You could put other things on there, and it really made for a nice viewing option for our customers. So not only did we have books and materials on our tables, but we also had some on the book stand. It's kind of funny, we think that just having our books there will be enough, but I found that customers looked at the signs before they tended to look too closely at the books, or they would look at the book but then look at the sign and really read the sign. I'm showing you some that I have here. They're just little signs that maybe have a review on them, have an award maybe your book won on them. They kind of help elevate the status of your book a little bit by telling a little bit about it. You can get them printed really cheaply at your local color copy store and then just frame them like in a cheap Walmart frame that's only going to cost you a couple of dollars, and have those around that are telling a little bit more about your book. It just makes the whole booth look better. It's a better experience for the customers, and it makes them more likely to buy. Another thing that I took that I'm really glad I took is some free handouts. I chose one book that I thought was kind of the star of the books that I had, which is my latest release, The Curse of King Midas. I created some handouts that related to that book, and in my case it was things you didn't know about the real King Midas. But yours could be anything that has to do with your book that just is kind of like, did you know this or did you know that? And I printed them out in black and white very cheaply. I had about 50 of them sitting there, and I just gave them to people. It was kind of funny because some of them would come over and start reading. I was like, oh, you can take one, they're free, you can take one. And I had my website on the bottom of that paper, so I knew that every person that took that paper was going to have my website there if they then wanted to look up my books later. Next, I would highly suggest that you have some way of attracting people's attention. This is probably the hardest part of setting up a booth, but I think it's one of the most important parts. We were lucky because we had a lot of people that were just readers, and they enjoyed seeing local authors there, which was one of the things that surprised me. But I had so many more people coming by and pausing just to look at this thing that I had to get their interest, and that was my skeleton, whom I've named Jackson. You may have seen him in one of my former videos. Jackson was there, and he was dressed up as the old or passed away King Midas. So I had fixed a crown and put that on his head, and I had a little kingly robe around him, and I sat him in a chair, and I put a little whiteboard sign on him, which I also purchased for the booth very cheaply. It just said, ask me where King Midas's body is. And I actually had some people come by and say, okay, where's King Midas's body? And that opened up the communication between us so that I could draw them in to what the story was, find out if it might be something they were interested in. So if you can have something like that, some little gadget, some little something. My fellow author brought some photos of herself when she was a young ballet dancer as a child. One of her books is about the Nutcracker, and she herself was in the Nutcracker ballet as a child. So she had all these cute little framed pictures of her as a little girl in her ballet poses or in her Nutcracker costumes, and people really like looking at that too. So think about what you may have that would kind of draw people's attention. That's not just your books. There's something else there that kind of, oh, this is interesting to look at, and brings them in, and then you can start talking to them. I would suggest that you start planning what you're going to have in your booth and getting your materials ready and everything at least a month beforehand. I needed to order signs, so that can take at least a week for them to ship those in. I took some more time to design them. You have to also order books if you don't have some already. So make sure that you're building in time to do all of that. Particular for your first craft fair, you're going to need that time. So build that in, and that will help you feel less stressed about it. Make sure you have some extra cash. A lot of people bring cash to these events, and so they're going to want change. So make sure you have extra cash so you can give them change if they need it. Also, I would suggest having a Square reader or some way to take payments by credit card. The people who didn't have cash paid by credit card. I had a Square on my phone that worked out perfectly. And make sure you test it before you start that day to make sure it's up and running. I was a little embarrassed because I had used the Square reader the week before on my phone. Everything was working fine, so I thought it was good. But then the first person that gave me a credit card, I pull up my Square and it's asking me for my passwords. Whatever reason, it was doing extra security that day, and I couldn't remember my password. So I had to go out to my car, get my computer, find my password, put it in to get it all set up, and the lady was very nice and ended up giving me cash instead so that she could go on while I had to do all that. So that was embarrassing. The day of the event, you make sure your Square or whatever you're using to take payments is up and running and ready to go. Our craft fair went from 10 to 4. There was no time to go for lunch. This was a well-run craft fair. We had steady people walking by, and a lot of them were right during the lunch hour from 12 to 2. There was no time to go do something else. So I had brought a protein bar. I was really glad I did. It saved me through that time, and I was able to go eat afterwards. So here's the really big tip that I told you that I would give you, that I'm positive was one of the reasons that I made out so well. And that is that you've got to draw people in. You've got to be open, you've got to be smiling, you've got to be talking to people as they go by, and you don't want to be pushy. So how do you do that? Number one was my skeleton sitting there. If anybody came by to talk to him, I definitely opened the conversation. Oh, did you know that King Midas was a real guy, and went into my spiel. But there was many other people that went by that weren't paying any attention to the skeleton, but they had something about about them that was interesting. Maybe they were wearing a really fun t-shirt, so I would comment on that. Some ladies had this beautiful jewelry that they were wearing, I would comment on that. All of my comments were genuine. I was watching the people and finding something about them, and then if they would come over, then I would simply ask them, do you like to read? If so, what do you like to read? And that opened up a conversation that many times led to a sale. Often people would say, oh, I like to read anything. Oh, really? Well, tell me what the last book was that you read. What was it like? What was it about? And pretty soon people are talking to me about the books that they've read, and the people that are readers are more than happy to share with you what they've been reading. A lot of times people were saying that they had read fantasy, so that was a perfect lead in to my book on King Midas. If they said that, I said, oh, well, you would really like this book because go into my little spiel. So if you can draw people close to you with some sort of a comment, in general, you have to get past your introverted nature if you are an introvert and put yourself out there and be interested in people. I think that is the biggest piece of advice I have for you, and be willing to get to know them whether they buy a book or not. If you can come across with that attitude, most likely you will make a sale. And I did many times with people that initially weren't really thinking they were going to buy a book. You have to remember that when people are going by in a craft fair, those of us that are standing in the booth can be a little intimidating to them. I've been on the other side of the fence when I've been going through a craft fair. I'm like, don't talk to me. I don't want to stop and talk. So you have to kind of bridge that space, and you can do that with a smile, with a question, with some genuine comment about them. Show them that you're interested, and that fear of talking with you will kind of go away a little bit. You may be surprised at how open people are to helping local authors, to supporting local authors. Being at a local event like that, you're getting your name out there and you're meeting local readers. If you're thinking of selling your books at a craft fair and you have questions, feel free to ask those in the comments and I'll get back to you on those. But I would highly suggest you try it. It made me feel really good about my writing, about the fact that people were interested in my books. It's a real motivational hit. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.